The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
So this is the last in the series, Overboard. And I had kind of left off like with some questions that I had. But I had a piece of true crime news I wanted to put in here. And I do that sometimes in the series because, once you get past like 2 episodes, like you have like other thoughts on things and it's the right timing. This was like a double whammy kind of thing. It doesn't have anything to do with cruise ships, but it certainly would fall under the category of Overboard to some regard. Do you remember the show To Catch a Predator?
Yes.
And like the popularity of sort of the insanity of it all?
Yeah, that show, along with like another show called like What Would You Do, which is different but also the same. Both of those shows were so so cringe. I mean, I would cringe, but like watch, but cringe.
Well, one of the things that's happened since To Catch a Predator, it's come and gone in like a couple iterations. But at this point, it's kind of gone.
And that was from the suicide, right?
Yeah. The original version of that show caused multiple legal issues. There was a death. There were other supposedly linked deaths to that show. But the real problem was the amount of overturning that occurred along the way made it sort of a not very feasible legal limbo surrounding what happened. But what has happened since then that's interesting is no shortage of wannabe influencers have popped up, quote, predator catching.
This is such a bad idea.
It is. It's a terrible idea.
We actually had like a whole episode on this, I think. It is such a bad idea for the Vigilante crew to take off.
Yeah, and we've had actually multiple episodes where it's either come up in news or it's come up in context of something else, or it stood on its own as a story. This particular one, like somehow this got in my newsfeed, and I could not tell you exactly how, because it's only thing I can think is maybe it's linked to an area that I frequently was looking at for other things. But the way it popped up for me was in early October. A writer named Joe Villasana. This is out of Texas, but it's going to be Waco area. So KWTX is News 10 down there. And that's probably how I get this Joe Villasana article. But here's what it says. A Central Texas man snared in an undercover sting conducted by a group known as Oklahoma Predator Prevention, or OPP, was arrested and charged in McLennan County. That's according to a criminal complaint affidavit. It says Jimmy Lee Manziel, 46, of Axtell, was arrested on October the 6th, charged with online solicitation of a minor, which is a third-degree felony. That's a pretty serious charge. But then it says, on August 16th, a deputy with the McLennan County Sheriff's Office was dispatched to a residence in Axtell, Texas. A person who called authorities identified themselves as a member of OPP and said they were with Manziel. According to the complaint, the OPP member told the deputy they pretended to be Zoe, an underage girl online. Zoe began communicating with who is now the defendant, and he sent her a photo of his penis. The deputy at the scene asked Manziel if he was willing to tell his side of the story, and he agreed. According to the document, Mansell explained that he had sent a picture of his penis, but he claimed he did not know the girl was a minor. A forensic computer examiner with the Texas Department of Public Safety recovered chats between Zoe and Mansell from June 13th to August 16th. And on July 29th, Zoe told Mansell she was kind of young, quote, only 14 years old. Zoe told Mansell they could still talk online, and Mansell allegedly replied, K. On August the 8th, he sent the decoy a selfie-styled penis picture. And on August 16th, the decoy sent Mansell her phone number, and Mansell proceeded to initiate and exchange text messages with the girl. That's all according to these documents that they've got over at News 10. So he doesn't have a bond at the time of this article, but according to its website, OPP has a mission to ensure the safety of our community's children through diligent collaboration with law enforcement agencies. It says that the OPP team operates on various apps posing as underage child decoys. We identify and engage with individuals who knowingly contact minors, initiate inappropriate conversations, and attempt to arrange meetings. Instead of meeting a child, these predators encounter the OPP team. We conduct live recorded conversations with these individuals and then hand over all collected evidence to law enforcement. Once the group has an appropriate amount of intelligence to ensure a conviction, it submits a comprehensive report to law enforcement. So basically, this is a private group that is making themselves cops.
Undercover cops, no less.
Yeah. I think in our lifetime, I hope, when I say this might be the closest we ever get to vigilante superheroes.
Oh, I disapprove of all of this.
Yeah, this is terrible. And so that's just the start of this piece of the story, by the way.
Not to mention, though, so I feel like this type of thing where you've got grown men pretending to be underage girls talking to other grown men.
Yeah.
This is ripe for defense attorneys to go crazy over. Okay.
Because
there is no crime being committed here.
Yeah, because of how the law works, it's confusing.
And while you can say, well, he thought it was a girl, right?
Right.
An underage girl, right? He thought it was, but it wasn't. And so, you're not really making the case here. I don't see how any prosecution based on private citizens catfishing potential predators, I don't see how that's going to stick legally speaking.
I think this either stems from me like doing a lot of stuff down in Texas and that area, and that's how I get it in my feed, or it potentially could come from this period of time earlier in the year. A member of my family was sending me a lot of reels of the takedowns. Have you seen these where they they baited them into like a public meeting and then they embarrassed them in a Walmart or a Target or something, and they posted on the internet after a lot of times physically assaulting them? Not just this group, but groups like it. Predator prevention groups.
I have never seen any. I'm not surprised that that's happening, but I don't think I've ever seen anything. I wouldn't have been looking for it. So
right. Well, I was certainly not looking for it, but now that I've gotten into this, there's an article a little later, October 25th of 2025. Same author, Joe Villasana and Isabel Quintanilla, but it pops up on WECT, which is News 6. It's another, Waco article, but this one's addressing some of the concerns that I have. It says deputies arrest members of vigilante group after suspected sex predator injured during sting. It's the exact same one I was just telling you about with Mansell. 3 apparent members of Oklahoma Predator Prevention, an online vigilante group that entrap suspected sex predators, were arrested after their recent involvement in a case in Texas. Russell Goodwin, Ryan Koch, and George Liebsch are charged with felony unlawful restraint, exposing someone to substantial risk of serious bodily injury. Two of the individuals have extensive criminal history spanning years, according to the McLennan County Sheriff's Office. The investigation started in August when the 3 Oklahoma Predator Prevention members traveled to McLennan County, Texas, to confront a man who allegedly engaged in an explicit online conversation with someone he believed was an underage girl. The girl was actually a decoy being used by Oklahoma Predator Prevention to entrap the suspected predator, which in this case, I think it's actually like one of the men talking and then one of their wives posing in the pictures. But Russell Goodwin's wife, said this is a situation they've seen go down many times before. We see where the conversation goes, and then we normally meet up with them and go over the chat logs with them, immediately call police, and hope for a conviction. So she's delusional. According to the McLennan County Sheriff's Office, Oklahoma Predator Prevention was founded by Goodwin, follows a trend that has become common among social media vigilante groups that use decoys and catchers to carry out sting-like operations that target suspected sex predators. The confrontations, often referred to as catches, are often streamed live on social media with the intent of exposing and humiliating the alleged predator. The live streams also generate online content aimed at monetizing and building a large audience. In August of 2025, Oklahoma Watch, a nonpartisan investigative journalism group, published an article describing Oklahoma Predator Prevention, or OPP, as a vigilante group. While OPP claims to protect children, critics say OPP's aggressive tactics, including targeting disabled individuals, jeopardizing criminal cases, will often lead to false confessions and evidentiary issues without legal accountability. This is according to a sheriff's office that is published in the summary of the Oklahoma Watch report. The case involving Oklahoma Predator Prevention and the Texas man resulted in an investigation that did confirm the target sent sexually explicit photos to the decoy. During the investigation, deputies reviewed video of the confrontation between the sting suspect and the 3 OPP members. The video revealed a coordinated effort by the 3 Oklahoma Predator Prevention members to control and restrict the man's movements, including directing him where to stand, corralling him into a secluded area, all while using aggressive and profane language. During the confrontation, the man lost consciousness, collapsed, and hit his head. It was at this point that OPP members decided to notify law enforcement. Russell Goodwin says it's still very confusing and claimed that he stood with the other 2 suspects, quote, a decent space away. The McLennan County Sheriff's Office said it remains fully committed to protecting children, but also wants to emphasize the importance of public safety and lawful conduct. The Sheriff's Office discouraged the public from engaging in vigilante activities. Instead, the agency urged individuals to report suspected criminal behavior to law enforcement immediately. Confronting suspected predators without proper training or proper law enforcement support is extremely dangerous and can result in unintended harm, tainted evidence, and interference with criminal investigations. The OPP members were arrested in Oklahoma and are being extradited to McLennan County. Okay.
All I can think is every time you say OPP,
the Naughty by Nature song?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I'm glad they pointed out that these are just felons running around being felons and making other people felons.
Well, and so I promise you, if there was not social media for clicks and likes and some sort of monetization or infamy, like this would not be happening. They wouldn't just be like quietly doing it, right?
Well, no, they would not.
And to me, the fact that, again, he sent a picture to a decoy who is probably another middle-aged man.
Or woman. I mean, it's a middle-aged person who's engaging with them.
And see, that's the thing, right? They're engaging.
Correct.
And so is it really, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things being overlooked here, especially when they have an end game that they're aiming for, right?
Yes.
I could probably convince anybody that they really wanted somebody that I'm pretending to be on the computer, right? If my end game was I want to reel this person out into public and humiliate them, that's what I'm going to be aiming to do. It doesn't give any sort of display of what the person's actually like, because the baiter will be, trying to get that end result. And so given a whole different set of circumstances where they're not baiting them, trying to get them out in public, they could act a completely different way. You have no idea.
Right.
But you're setting them up to fail, essentially, by doing the thing you're trying to get them to do. And that's just wrong. I'm not really sure why anybody thinks oh, that's a good idea. I do think it's 100% likes and clicks and the notoriety or the infamy that comes along with the idea that they're doing this type of thing. It's not coming from an actual place of what should be happening, right?
They're committing crimes while accusing other people of committing crimes and saying their crimes are worse.
It's my favorite thing that happens. I just love it when that happens.
Strange.
And you wonder, okay, so they are restraining. Again, you have to go back to the root of the thing here, because they're oh, you like underage girls. But is that really what happened? Because there were two middle-aged men communicating. And so it's this whole thing. What if they were well, I actually have a thing for middle-aged men who pretend to be underage girls.
Yeah, it's the ultimate defense.
Exactly. And I could tell that you weren't really an underage kid and that you were an adult pretending to be an underage kid. And I think that's hot, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this whole thing, because that's never going to turn out the way that, you think it should. And unless they could do it completely under the radar, no, do not do that stuff.
Right. So I've been looking at these groups since last year. One up in Shasta County, they filed charges against a group called Dads Against Predators, which is another one of these groups. We have Albany, New York. The police there actually ended up having almost a riot with a local vigilante group, even though they arrest someone accused of child sex crimes in the middle of it. There's another group in July up in Philadelphia. They get arrested after they provide information for an arrest in Bucks County. And I just want to say that it's kind of the ultimate niche in a way, because our country, by and large, finds it very difficult to defend any actions by someone accused of harming children. And to a degree, we should.
These guys haven't harmed children.
Right. Well, so the idea is, if they would do it in this situation and a real child presented themselves, then they would do it there too. So that part makes it very difficult to say anything bad about the vigilante groups until they get out of control.
Well, I was going to say, so again, you've got two different goals, right? A kid talking to some rando on the internet is going to act a completely different way than a person who is pretending to be a kid who has this end game planned.
Right.
So it's two different things, right? And as far as we know, we like to think oh, they would go after any underage person they were talking to. But we have no idea if that's the case or not, because this was all planned.
Right. And how much of this is coercion, where they normally are, they're just lonely people who are talking because someone's talking back.
Exactly. And see, I feel it's a much higher percentage than you might initially think, because people are lonely.
Yeah.
And engagement, to the extent that I imagine these vigilante groups are going to, it's probably very flattering.
Right.
And the person feels special. And it's a bigger play than oh, you're just a perv, right? It's such a bigger thing and I'm not saying anything that would make hurting a child okay at all.
Right.
One thing I have wondered, which I realize how this would make it even more niche because like the timing, but one thing I wouldn't probably feel the same way about is, let's say, for example, like something happened to like my child and I went to the police and they didn't do anything about it. And then like, you know, I decided I was going to be a vigilante and go get the person
Right.
and make the cops do something. See, that's different because that's not like catfishing. That would be like something happened personally.
Right.
And then the law didn't play out like it was supposed to. But that's one thing that I could actually see kind of the point. I still don't think it's a great idea, but like these people like literally are trying to reel in people to get them to humiliate them and get them in trouble.
Right.
It's insane.
It is. And so what does this have to do with Overboard? Well, one of the things I noticed when I got into this disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, which is where this all starts, is her case is pretty simple. And the thing that's kept it alive has largely been like vigilante investigators and then the online community, which like I was checking up to see what the most recent stuff was on her case and kind of going through the subreddits. And there's multiple subreddits dedicated to finding Amy Lynn Bradley, who fell off a boat a very long time ago.
And unfortunately drowned.
But it has become a thing. So I encourage people to look at this website, cruisejunkie.com, particularly the events portion, which I think you shared with me recently. You shared something from there as well.
It was like a chart.
Yeah. There's an amazing amount of weird things that have happened on cruise ships. But there was a mystery or two I wanted to talk about, and I pulled them from this website, jhmoncrief.com, who is a mystery and suspense writer. But they had one that I just want to walk through the details on that. And then I had a question sort of at the end of it that's more general, and you and I are going to talk about that. They put up this story called Unsolved Mysteries, Whatever Happened to Marion Carver. Have you ever heard of her story?
Only for how we're covering it now.
Okay, so there's this old show. It's a documentary show called Cruise Ship Killers. And the J.H. Moncrief, JHMONCRIEFF.com, the person writing here says, I was fortunate enough to be the writer expert for a true crime documentary show called Cruise Ship Killers. And he says this show tells the stories of 26 people who vanished, died mysteriously, or were the victims of other crimes while on board a cruise. And he says some names and other identifying details have been changed on the show for legal reasons. But he says, this is the story that haunted me the most. And because it's like the spooky season, I thought this is a good one to talk about. But it's a mystery on a cruise ship, so to speak. It says, in August 2004, a 40-year-old red-haired poet and investment banker named Marion Carver boarded the Mercury, one of Royal Caribbean's celebrity cruise ships. She embarked upon a 7-day cruise from Seattle, Washington to Alaska. Her steward, Dominic Montero, found her to be personable, relaxed, and looking forward to the cruise. She told him she planned to go upstairs later, but she did not want to visit the dining room. When she mentioned the same wish the following night, he suggested ordering room service. He brought her 2 sandwiches at her request. And that's the last time anybody ever sees Marion Carver alive. Now, according to the vanishing part of this little blog post, when Domingo Montero checks on Marion Carver's cabin the following morning, her bed's not been slept in. There's a tip and a manila envelope with still unknown contents that's been left behind. All of her belongings are there, including the only pair of shoes she brought with her, apparently. He reports her missing right away, continues to report her missing for the remaining 5 days of the cruise, and his supervisor finally tells him to do his job and forget about it. So the cruise ends, And Domingo again raises concerns with his supervisor that he's not seen Marion Carver, and they tell him to box up Marion's personal belongings, bring them into the office. No one secures the cabin. No one collects evidence. The supervisor puts her belongings in like his own locker, except for her clothing. The clothing is donated to a charity. No one files a police report. No one contacts her family. The Royal Caribbean contacts the FBI, but not until Marion Carver had been missing for 5 weeks. Meanwhile, Miss Carver's 13-year-old daughter, who'd been living with her dad, she couldn't figure out how to reach her mom, so she contacts Marion Carver's dad, or grandpa, Kendall Carver. He reports the daughter missing through Cambridge, Massachusetts police when he could not reach her. They start investigating her financial records, and they discover the credit card charges for the round-trip cruise. None of her family members, none of her friends had any idea she'd gone on a cruise. But according to them, it was not all that unusual. She's single, she's independent, she's been known to take other trips when she wanted to, quote, clear her head. She doesn't let everybody know where she's going, how long she's going to be gone. So when Kendall Carver contacts Royal Caribbean to talk about his daughter having been on the ship, it takes them 3 days for them to get back to him about her being on this boat. By this point, she's been missing for 26 days. A risk management manager for the cruise line tells him that no alarm had been raised after her disappearance. It is, quote, normal for people to leave their belongings behind, and, quote, normal for them to suddenly change their rooms without notice. And according to Kendall Carver, that's when the real living hell was about to begin. In his own words from various reports, he's a grieving father, and he's met with multiple obstacles and roadblocks whenever he's trying to get answers about what's happened to his kid. He's told that the ship's surveillance cameras only keep the footage for 3 days, and then they basically erase and start over. The cruise line maintained they had no reports about his daughter during the cruise. They refused to reveal to him the name of Domingo, the person who was her steward. So he finally hires a private investigation firm, and this ends up resulting in more questions than answers. So Royal Caribbean lets the investigator onto the ship, but he's not allowed to talk to anyone, including the ship's security officer. He reports that it's a short walk from Marion Carver's room to an observation deck that's about 100 feet above the waterline, and there she could have easily been pushed or have jumped from this deck. He hires Massachusetts lawyers to start digging into this case, and he ends up hiring Florida lawyers to dig into this case, which is where the cruise line is based out of. Multiple cruise line employees are contacted, and this does result in January of 2005, 2 of these employees give telephone depositions. So he figures out that Domingo did care about his daughter, and he gets more distressed when he finds out that Domingo's supervisor brushes off Domingo trying to report this woman missing. The supervisor, dismissing these concerns, gets fired, and they're kind of sheltered from the FBI. So the FBI doesn't talk to the supervisor. According to this author, he's never been named or located. And there were reports that the supervisor had just found work on a different shift. So the manila envelope with the money and whatever else is in there, that disappears along with this cruise line supervisor. So Kendall Carver files a lawsuit against Royal Caribbean. That case goes to trial in August 2005, which he finally gets a copy of the security report, and he felt like that indicated a cover-up. He also learned that he'd been lied to about the surveillance footage, where they said they were only keeping it for 3 days. It actually would have still been there because they keep it for over 30 days. And there should have been footage from the time that she disappeared at that 26-day mark when he is trying to get Royal Caribbean to pay attention. So during this trial, the cruise line releases official statements to the media. They claim that Marion Carver had severe emotional problems. She had attempted suicide before, and they write it off to her having committed suicide on their boat. So this author in parenthetical expression leaves a note here: suicide is often the excuse when a passenger goes missing. So Kendall Carver, he wins the lawsuit. It's a hollow victory. All told, he'd already spent $75,000 on investigators and lawyers. He still has no idea what's happened to Marion Carver, but he does believe she's dead. He's going to pass away in December 2019 without ever having found out what happened to her. But he was one of the founding members of the International Cruise Victims that I mentioned in the last episode that I wanted to swing back around to. The author here leaves a couple of notes. It just says more weirdness. It says Marion had booked passage on the cruise only 2 days before it sailed. She brought 2 handbags, no suitcases on board. She had 1 pair of shoes, 1 dress, both of which were left in her room when she vanished. If she walked to the observation deck to commit suicide, she did it in her underwear. Marion did not use the cruise ship's currency card during the 2 days she was on board, which is like a debit card that you could use, but it only works there on the boat. There was no record of her ever having left the ship. And it says that there was a former crew member who contacted Kendall Carver and tells him that Marion had been having a relationship with another unidentified crew member. So they close out with, unfortunately, when Marion's marriage ended in divorce in 2000, she lost custody of her daughter. She sank into a deep depression. She threatened suicide. There's no evidence she even attempted suicide in the past, but this history gave Royal Caribbean the ammunition it needed. However, her steward insisted she did not seem upset, out of sorts, sad, or angry. If she had planned on committing suicide, why the round-trip ticket? If the manila envelope contained a suicide note, why didn't the cruise line release it, since it would have proven their theory? One thing many tourists don't realize is that American cruise ships sail under foreign flags, which is something you have pointed out many times in the past, that allows them to circumvent U.S. laws and taxes. When a crime is committed on a cruise ship, it is rarely investigated promptly or properly, and it's rarely reported promptly. An average of 10 Americans disappear from cruise ships every year, which is slightly different than the numbers we've been throwing around.
I don't think that 10 disappear.
Well, going overboard, per se.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and they sort of just close this out with a rest in peace to Kendall Carver. That story is terrible. I do think it's another one where there's probably an explanation that's falling overboard, jumping overboard, something to a degree.
Well, to the extent that I was trying to figure out, like, how long was she accounted for on the cruise?
Into the 3rd day.
And then how long was the cruise?
7-day cruise.
Okay. And so the fact that she left a generous tip on day 3. Okay.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
And, I feel like the manila envelope probably had all the answers in it. Every single thing about this leads up to a suicide.
Right.
And the fact that she left a generous tip, because typically when you're on a trip and you stay in a room, I've never been on a cruise before, but like you stay in your room anywhere, you have like one or maybe like a couple shifts of people that attend to you. And at the end, you leave them a tip. And the fact that she left a tip in the middle of the cruise tells me she knew she wasn't coming back, but she still wanted to leave her steward a tip.
Yeah.
And the manila envelope, I don't know that it had a suicide note in it.
It's probably stuff to leave for her daughter.
Well, it could have had like her last wishes, her last will and testament, like who knows what it is. But quite frankly, I think she would be genuinely perplexed that anybody thought anything but like suicide was what happened to her.
Yeah.
The cruise ship, they say, well, we just knew immediately she committed suicide, right? Okay, well, like you still didn't report it.
Right.
And that's relevant, right? That's more than likely that's why her father won the lawsuit, because it sounds like they just completely dismissed the fact that she was there and then she wasn't.
Yeah, it also seems like Royal Caribbean only contacts the FBI because like Kendall Carver doesn't seem like he's going to be giving up on it.
Well, they should have notified somebody. They should have something should have occurred not 5 weeks later. There should be some sort of, just as a kind of ludicrous example, if you were on a plane and your name's on the manifest and you don't arrive, I feel like they should notify like everybody, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Same thing here. You have like every right to go missing or whatever, but there are certain situations where like you're in a confined space and it doesn't make sense that like without some, like a helicopter picking you up or something, like something really obvious, like it doesn't make sense that you're no longer there.
Yeah.
It requires explanation, I think. But in this case, I think that now it does sound like by the time there was investigation starting to be brewing, that, I heard somebody say she was having a relationship with another unnamed crew member. And so I think that I can see where everything's always more interesting looking back, right?
Oh, yeah. The hindsight. Yeah.
It always is more interesting. I guess it gets hyped up because it is like they're on this cruise vacation. And I guess some cruises really can be pretty magical.
Yeah.
But I have no idea. I've never been on a cruise. But you have to think to yourself, like, is this banker poet, like, really the most exciting thing that ever happens in her life is her death? And it is then in turn covered up on the cruise ship. However, there was really no need to cover it up to begin with because, like, hardly anybody noticed to begin with.
Right.
You see where, like, the cover-up starts to immediately fall apart? They didn't have to cover up anything. Nobody was even, like, putting the flag out.
Right. And that's the part that I think people miss. And I understand her dad's frustrations here. Like, not knowing what happened to your kid and having the body to identify and to grieve and to memorialize is its own level of shock. I find it difficult to look at her life and story and go, okay, well, then we have to couple that with someone having murdered her on a cruise ship, which we've already determined is rare. And could it happen? Maybe.
What are the chances, though? Like, she didn't even want to leave her room. She didn't want to go to the dining hall. Like, where did she run into her killer at?
Right. And that's where these stories become,
they don't make
strange.
sense, right? It's just a tale. It's a way more interesting story to say, like, ooh, look what happened. And honestly, this is a very sad, personal, terrible tragedy, right?
It is.
And if something came to light that showed that I was wrong, I would be the first to say I was wrong. But I mean, really, it seems highly unlikely that this is not exactly what occurred based on the facts as they're presented, at least here. And, I said that I only knew about her because of us talking about it, or getting ready to talk about it now, but I was aware of her before this time because we looked at her for like keys even.
Yeah, we ruled her out as a probable suicide when we were looking
She's one of the only stories where I say this, and then you'll probably come up with some examples and I'm wrong, but for one thing, she had red hair and she stands out in my mind because of that. She was young and she was attractive and she had hard times, but she had red hair. But she's also like, she was going on a cruise by herself. Right. Which is like, okay, I guess. But it stands out in my mind. And then when they described like how she packed, and then they said if she had walked out, she would have had to have walked out in her underwear.
Right.
How does anybody know what she had?
Or maybe there was a robe in a room. And that's what she went over on.
Well, sure.
So
And
there's all kinds of stuff.
I'm just saying, though, like, how does anybody know that she really only had the one dress?
Oh, they don't. They're just assuming based on like you would have to have like another unusual fact that like maybe she carried a spare dress or shorts or something in one of her handbags because she clearly had.
Maybe her underwear looked just like a bikini, but I mean, I get it was
Right.
an Alaskan cruise.
Right.
I don't know, let's see, it was in August. So yeah, it probably gets hot up there.
I wasn't looking at it from any kind of weather perspective. I was just trying to
they said she had to walk out in her underwear. My point being that if it was that type of thing, it may not have looked that odd for her to be in her underwear if it looked like a swimsuit.
Right. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't dispute what you're saying. I ultimately think whatever she was wearing, I think she probably went over the side, whether it's on purpose or not. But the circumstances of her having left tend to make me think she took her own life. And like, maybe that's a trap. Maybe I'm falling into like the wrong pattern of thinking. And she is some kind of unusual example where all that's true. And she was able to, in that situation, become the victim of some type of predator who goes completely unnoticed on this cruise ship.
I would bet that she walked away from her life and started over before I would bet that she had been murdered.
Yeah, I could see that too. Like, and she could even have wanted it all to just look like that. And really, she just hid out somewhere else because nobody's looking for her. She hides out somewhere else on the boat and then leaves.
Exactly. And I actually have absolutely no information about like tracking on a cruise ship, especially not in 04.
Yeah.
But there's no record that she left, which means, she didn't leave, or she left the unconventional way of over the rail.
Right.
Or somebody put her in something and took her off. That's the other thing. There can be some wild stories about how these bodies get removed, right?
Yeah.
But I have to say, I think it is very unlikely that the average person is going to have the bag it would take to take another average person and put them in it and transport them off.
It would be a lot of work to come on a cruise ship, find a person, take them with you. I'm not saying it never happens or never has happened. I just think
I think it's never happened. I don't know for sure. That's just my opinion. I think it's possibly never happened.
I had read this like one weird online link, and it created more questions for me. I'm going to use it here. I'm going to tell you in advance, this is a weird blog that I pulled this from. It apparently comes from lipcon.com, which is Lipcon, Margulies, and Winkleman, PA, which would indicate they're practicing attorneys. They have a blog that is interesting. I'm going to read a little piece of it, and then we're going to move on from Marion Carver's case because I have a couple more things I want to talk about. And one of the notes on here was strange. It starts off. It just says it's written by the people who work here. Essentially, it's written by LM and W, which is the name of the partners for this firm or whatever. It says cruise ship disappearances happen more often than anyone can imagine, much more often than reported. Between the overserving of alcohol, assault incidents on the high seas, and various other accidents that take place aboard cruise ships, statistics show that over 30 passengers have mysteriously disappeared from vessels in the past 4 years alone. And this blog is dated. This blog is undated. But it looks like it's mid-2000s somewhere. It says attention was given to the subject of cruise disappearances recently after the remains of a woman who vanished from a vessel several years ago were uncovered. It says police suspect the bones of a deceased victim that were recently found on Mary Island in Canada were those of Marion Carver. Age 40 at the time of her disappearance, Carver disappeared from the celebrity cruise ship Mercury while it was on an Alaskan itinerary in August 2004. Police have contacted the alleged victim's father, he died in 2019, which is what makes me think this is an older blog in Phoenix, Arizona, hoping that DNA tests would give them answers as to whether those are in fact the remains of Marion Carver and what could have possibly happened to her. Marion, the mother of one child, left on the cruise ship without notifying any of her family members. The second day of the itinerary, the cabin attendant noticed that no one used the bed and reported the matter to her boss, who promised to look into the incident, but told the attendant to just forget it and do your job. Now, that's different than Domingo, but this is I'm qualifying that this is probably not a great source. It says, doing as she was told, the attendant continued to do her job, placing customary chocolates on the pillow of the untouched bed night after night. Marion was never seen again. After the vessel docked in Vancouver, Marion's possessions were packed away. No one even notified the police or her family she's missing. It wasn't until Marion's father reported her missing that police learned of the cruise ship disappearance. To this day, Kendall Carver has spent thousands of dollars trying to investigate what happened to his daughter on this ship. Carver has been appalled by the delay in reporting the disappearance of his daughter. He had this to say: "It took the cruise company 3 days to conclude that Marion had been on the cruise. By then, 26 days had passed since her disappearance. They confirmed she hadn't slept in her cabin after the first night, but hinted this was not unusual. She could have spent the night in another cabin or gone ashore in Vancouver without having to document it. The cruise company claimed that films from the surveillance camera was erased after 12 days, which was a flat-out lie. The videos were erased after 30 days. Unfortunately, before that was known, the videos were deleted and it was too late to review them. Marion's case is a prime example of the disturbing reality surrounding cruise ship vacations. There is no police on board, and it's highly unlikely a disappearance case will be resolved quickly." And they go on to talk about between 2003 and 2006, 24 cruise passengers disappeared, and that did not include suicides and accidents caused by intoxication. Since that time, 10 more passengers and 2 crew members have been reported missing, leading to U.S. Congress to investigate cruise ship security and find out the industry is in fact guilty of suppressing or underreporting disappearances. And they say some things here that you've said in different ways. It says a cruise ship is a small town. And that's according to Congressman Christopher Shays. Traveling on a cruise can be the perfect way to commit the perfect crime. Yeah.
People, okay, yes, that's true. That could be. I just don't think it's the goal of, even a percentage of people who go on cruises to go on the cruise to do the crime. It's actually, it could be the perfect crime, but more than likely it's going to be a very obvious crime that you're going to get caught for immediately.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. In this case, I had so many questions that I really wanted to find a case that sort of looked typical of a person disappearing that we didn't understand. So I found that. And then I had the question of if someone was killed on a cruise ship, what would happen? And I wanted to bring up kind of 2 more stories in this as the wrap up to Overboard. I truly feel like most of the mystery in these cruise ship cases, like the ones that remain, is fueled by the true crime community wanting clicks and likes, just like these vigilante groups we started out talking about, and less by the actual mystery itself.
I do think that the mystery, though, I think people want it to be more mysterious.
I agree with you. That's certainly gonna the unknown certainly drives the concept of getting more attention on a case, and the more interesting and weird and mysterious you make it, the more clicks and likes you get.
Sure. And see, for me, okay, so when certain things come up, I actually feel not necessarily with this case, but I actually feel kind of bad because I feel like she left her estate papers there.
Oh, you think it was a will?
I think she tipped the steward. And again, what are they going to use money for while they're at work, right?
Well, if you tip them, they remember you, but they also will do you a favor if you've left them something that needs to be delivered somewhere.
Well, that's true, but that didn't happen, right?
Right.
And so there's a manila envelope whose contents were unknown, and there was a generous tip. And this is like right at the beginning or the middle of the cruise, right? And so a generous tip was put out. So my point in saying that is it wasn't unexpected that she disappeared, because if she had been murdered, how would she have known to put the tip out?
Right.
Okay. And so the fact that she had already, she said, I'm going to complete my mission here. I'm going to put this manila envelope out with all the information that needs to be given back to my next of kin, because they will be so sure that I committed suicide, because what else could have possibly happened to me?
Right.
And then she left the tip, which I imagine she probably, I don't see why she wouldn't have left all the cash she had to the person, right?
Right.
Which is another thing. Was it a generous tip, or was it like literally all the cash she had? That could be quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you? It was like the last person who was nice to her, right?
Yeah.
And I get where the steward could have said, oh, she didn't seem suicidal. Well, the suicidal ideation didn't develop or like go away during that short period of time. This was probably very well thought out on her part. And except for her saying like, except for the earlier brush with like, oh, she was suicidal when she lost custody of her daughter after her divorce, she probably never said a word about killing herself.
Right.
Again, but she planned all this out, and it seems to me like she probably went out the way she planned to. And it's every single thing about this sounds like it's possible. I would say she didn't even want everybody to know what happened to her. But at the same time, if they had the manila envelope, I think, what are you going to leave behind in a manila envelope? Except like, oh, okay, so this is who this needs to go to. This is what has happened, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe she felt like, I guess it would have been better to go ahead and address it and ask the steward who, like, you just left the generous tip for, to please mail it, because, like, nobody's going to notice that she's missing for 25 days until her daughter can't get a hold of her, which is just bizarre to me. I feel like there was a severe problem with that. But I do want to point out that the article that you just read about from the Professional Association lawyers, they are talking about thinking that Marion Carver's body had been found, and that kind of gets left hanging in the air. Nobody ever comes back and says it wasn't her. They were seeking to collect a DNA sample from her father.
Right.
And this was in 2013, so he would have still been alive at that point in time. And sometimes the answer is in the silence.
It is. I'm going to throw one more piece about that case up here. I found the old missing persons bulletin that the Alaska State Troopers put out. So that's the Alaska Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Public Safety. They have a picture of her from 2003 where she's clearly made up well, but her eyes are a little off in the picture. Like, it kind of looks like she's been taken by surprise that someone is photographing her. And it just says endangered adult, Marion Lynn Carver, age 40 years old, DOB April 3rd, 1964. She's 5'7", 100 pounds with red hair, hazel eyes. It refers to the photo, which it's very clearly her in the photo. It says Marion Carver was last seen by a cabin attendant aboard the celebrity cruise vessel Mercury on the evening of August 28th, 2004. She boarded the ship in Seattle, Washington, August 27th. The cruise line confirmed she did not disembark at any ports of call in Juneau, Skagway, Ketchikan, or Prince Rupert, nor did she receive any room service after the 28th. The cruise ship is unable to confirm if she got off the vessel at the end of the cruise in Vancouver on September 3rd, 2004. Some of her personal belongings were discovered in her cabin after the cruise ended. Mrs. Carver apparently did not board a return flight to Massachusetts, and it says anyone having contact or information regarding Marion Carver can contact Detective Brian Branley, Cambridge Police Department, Massachusetts at 617-349-3211. It's got the case number on there, and then it says Alaska Bureau of Investigation Missing Persons Clearinghouse, and it has their phone number there as well. So, this exists. They put out a bolo on her, basically.
When was it? Like still 25 days later, right?
This is at the end of 2004 that this goes out.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was clearly a little bit of work. I don't know how you do that work, though. They're on a boat. You've got Alaska involved. You've got Seattle involved. You've got Canada involved. You've got Massachusetts involved with a Florida company that runs cruises on the West Coast.
So based on the information, if you're not trying to spin a narrative for a true crime related form of entertainment,
Correct.
What happened?
She harmed herself and jumped off the boat.
And I would even
fell.
I would even allow that. I would say, without knowing any better, it's possible that she fell. You can make the determination for yourself. There's a whole lot of things like, lack of clothing, like putting the tip out. Like there's a whole lot of things that make it seem like it was more intentional from her part, but I don't care how you say it. They were on the ocean and she was there. They were still on the ocean and then she was not there. What happened? Well, she's in the ocean.
Right.
And it's not really this huge mystery.
I don't think so.
I think people underestimate the, let's say that it was somebody who had done something. Cruise ships are very small quarters. Even deluxe rooms are small rooms, right?
Yeah.
You're basically, they have all the attractions and everything. And it's like a floating town. But the quarters, the rooms that the passengers and the crew stay in are tiny and they're basically just right on top of one another.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the things that I've always found interesting about all the things that go wrong on cruises and all these mysteries is because people severely underestimate who's going to come forward having seen something suspicious. Most of the time, a passenger is going to have no loyalty to anybody outside of their group, and everybody's so on top of each other, people are going to hear stuff.
Right.
People are going to come forward. Now, in this case, I realized that she wasn't reported missing until 25 days later, which again is kind of if she was murdered and it wasn't even noticed that she was gone for 25 days, how much does that suck, right?
Right.
Because that would suck, but I don't really think that's what happened. But I also don't think that anybody on the cruise ship was like, hey, let's not tell anybody about this. I think they were like, hey, she decided to do something else besides finish the cruise. None of our business.
Yeah.
I think that's how it went down.
If you're looking for a rabbit hole to go down, the list of people who have disappeared mysteriously at sea is a pretty interesting thing to go down. There's lots of true crime content about this. I pulled out one other story that I'm going to talk about now, and then I have a wrap up here in a minute, but it's not this one. One of the things I pulled out when we were going through the international cruise victims' families and the foundation that have been formed out of all of this was I came across the name James Christopher Scavone, and there's a pretty interesting write-up on Substack on CT missing people, and I bring him up because he's tied to Connecticut. This is written under the name or pen name Victoria Sundqvist on ctmissingpeople.substack.com, and it just says the Connecticut man who vanished. This is James Christopher Scavone had a promising future. Then he went on a cruise with his friends and he was never seen again. He was 22 years old when he disappeared on July 5th, 1999. He would be 47 today if he's still alive. That's as of the writing, October 13th, 2024. He'd actually be 48 today. Called Jimmy by his friends and family. He's a 1995 graduate of Maloney High School in Meriden, and a star player and captain of both the school soccer team and the tennis team. He went to Western Connecticut State University in Danbury and landed a full-time internship at the Newton Office of Community Development. In the spring of 1999, he graduated from Western Connecticut with a bachelor's degree in economics. He had plans to earn a master's degree at Robert Wagner's Graduate School of Public Service. That's at New York University. He wanted to become a city planner. He spent part of the summer working at Ridgewood Country Club in Danbury and lived with his friends on Grandview Avenue less than a mile away. His parents had given him money for a graduation gift, which he decided to use on a 7-day cruise on the Carnival cruise ship Destiny, which we've already talked about Destiny and George Smith, who's also from Connecticut, with his best friend Jeff Simeon, 12 members of Jeff's family, and a few other friends. The 2,600 passenger ship boasting 500 staterooms left Miami Sunday, July 4th and headed towards San Juan, Puerto Rico. The ship was also scheduled to stop in St. Croix and St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands before it would return to Miami. That first night on the ship, Scavone met up with his friends for an 8 p.m. dinner before heading to the ship's casino around 10 p.m., and from there the group went to the Point After nightclub. Friends told police that Scavone had excused himself around 12:30 a.m. to go to a restroom. Some of the friends say that he had mentioned not feeling well. When the friends returned to their quarters around 3 a.m. and realized that Scavone wasn't there, they assumed he had met someone, would be back later in the morning. When he still wasn't back by 10 a.m., his travel companions alerted authorities, who made attempts at contacting Scavone via the ship's intercom system. Those were unsuccessful, which prompted a 12-hour cabin-by-cabin search of the ship. Officials also alerted the Coast Guard. At the time, a cruise line spokesman told the Hartford Courant that between the time Scavone was last seen and the Coast Guard was called, the ship might have traveled as many as 200 miles. He told the newspaper it's rare for passengers to, quote, fall off cruise ships, but that it does happen. Now, what I'm about to read here is coming from this blog. It says between 2009 and 2019, there were 212 reported incidents internationally of people falling overboard from cruise ships, which is an average of about 19 people each year, which is a different number from all the other numbers we've pulled in all of this. But it's according to a report on operational incidents that was issued by the Cruise Lines International Association. For some reason, that report did not contain any data for the year that this particular person went missing.
It was the same year, however, that Amy Lynn Bradley went missing, right?
Right. And that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up here and kind of the conclusion of the series. Scavone's missing persons report NamUs, the national missing persons database, missing and unidentified persons database, indicates he was last seen while at sea in international waters near San Juan, Puerto Rico.
I really like the way they have to put like a location in, and that's how they did it.
Yeah.
He's just hanging out in the water.
Once the ship docks in San Juan, the FBI is given permission to get on board. They conduct their own search. They interview everybody who'd been traveling with them. They question Jeff Simeon, the best friend, but he had an alibi. He's ruled out as having had anything to do with the disappearance. So then they check Scavone's sail card, which is those cards we were talking about. It's a debit card on the boat. It's just a cashless payment card, but it's also a key to the passenger's room. It shows him at 12:10 a.m. buying 2 drinks, and it has no activity after the time he was last seen around 12:30. It also showed that he never re-entered his room after he left his group of friends. So officials post flyers across the cruise ship with his photo on it. A few people came forward about having seen him the night he disappeared, and these people, some of them show up on Cruise Ship Killers, which is a 2021 series about all of this. One witness said they had seen Scavone eating outside an elevator. Another told police they'd seen the missing man stumbling down hallways and knocking on cabin doors. The FBI did review surveillance footage from various areas of the ship, but they were unable to find any sign of him. A woman from South Carolina told officials she'd gotten a phone call the morning of July 5th from a man saying he needed help, followed by a scream and shuffling of furniture before the call abruptly ended. The authorities looked into the woman's story, but it was They looked into the woman's story, but it is unclear whether the woman was telling the truth, and if so, whether the phone call she received had anything to do with Scavone or if it was from someone else. The official investigation closes in August 2000, and he's been presumed dead. The family never gets any answers from this. His mother, Jean, told the Associated Press in 2005, "I don't understand how all these people could have fallen off a cruise ship. All I know is my son left home, and he never came back." About a week after Scavone's disappearance, the family held a memorial service at St. Rose of Lima Church in Meriden. 5 years in a row, they published an in memoriam for his birthday saying, "We love you and miss you." Jean and her late husband, John, also attended congressional hearings to advocate for better security on cruise ships, hoping to make a difference in the lives of others after their own devastating experience. And this blogger wraps up with, at the time of his disappearance, Scavone was 5'10", weighed about 165 pounds, with graying brown hair, he had brown eyes, a mole on the lower right side of his face, and a raised horseshoe-shaped scar on his upper left arm. He was also wearing a silver chain necklace with a tennis racket pendant. So, for me, everything about his case seems like this is what should happen if you disappear at sea.
Sure. He clearly left because of his the money card, sale card. He bought drinks, and then he was last seen about 20 minutes after he had those drinks, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so he said, "I don't feel well, I'm going to the bathroom." Well, he never made it to the bathroom. I imagine he probably didn't want to throw up everywhere, so he was trying to throw up over the edge, right?
Yeah.
And, they hit turbulence or something. I don't know. I do think it probably is rare, right?
Yeah.
But, a serial killer did not find the drunk guy that was throwing up and take him as the next victim.
No, I don't. I bring him up because, honestly, he probably falls overboard. Everybody kind of knows that, it could happen. I don't think he's going to be a jumper per se, but I guess he could be, because you could still be emotionally set on, something that's a permanent solution to a temporary problem if you've had too much alcohol and that's not a normal thing for you.
That is entirely true. I feel like anybody could get real brave after they've had all the drinks you can possibly drink on a cruise ship and decide that they're just done with everything, even if it's completely out of character.
Right. And I got kind of deep into this cruise ship stuff, and I was left with a question that we were not going to answer today. And that question is has anybody ever been taken from a cruise ship for the purpose of sex trafficking? The closest I can give you guys is I doubt it. But I did want to know, what would happen if you were murdered on a cruise ship? And I don't get the exact answer, but I'm going to give you a little bit of something here. This is from CBS News, June 4th, 2021. This is just written by the staff to put out on the wire. But it says, "Man who killed wife on Alaska cruise after she allegedly asked for a divorce gets 30 years in prison." So this is going to answer some of those questions. A Utah man was sentenced Thursday to 30 years in prison in the beating death of his wife on an Alaskan cruise in 2017. A federal judge describes the crime as violent and brutal. Prosecutors had sought life in prison for Kenneth Manzanares, who pleaded guilty last year to second-degree murder in the death of his wife, Christy. His attorneys had requested 7.5 years. It says Kenneth Manzanares looked back briefly toward where two of his daughters were sitting in the courtroom after being led out after U.S. District Court Judge Timothy Burgess announced his decision. His attorneys in a court filing said he had brain abnormalities that a defense expert deemed consistent with injuries caused by playing contact sports. This, combined with what was at the time an undiagnosed bipolar disorder and a problematic combination of prescribed medication and alcohol, resulted in an aberrant episode of violence. But Burgess said there was competing evidence offered about his culpability, and experts had failed to show what factors led to the crime. Prosecutors had disputed the defense's medical claims, and in court documents described the actions as intentional, triggered by his wife telling him she wanted to leave the cruise ship and she wanted a divorce. Prosecutors said Christie told her husband she wanted a divorce that night during an argument about his behavior, so this is the night of her death. A passenger on the ship, Ruby Plata, was with her husband aboard the ship when she heard an announcement over the intercom. Whoever was talking was pretty scared because their voice was shaking, she says in this CBS News interview. She said that it was a domestic altercation. Another passenger, Chris Seaman, he told Yuccas this is Jamie Yuccas from CBS News, he was on the 9th level in a room across from where it happened. He said one of the little girls from that room came running out, calling for help, that their parents had been in a fight. She sounded pretty desperate, and the crew came up as quickly as they could. Prosecutors said that Kenneth Manzanares had issues with anger. He had acknowledged restraining his wife in the past and punching holes in walls. Defense attorneys said the couple had a long and happy marriage. That's at least according to Jamie McGrady, who was a federal public defender in this matter. Jamie McGrady also accuses prosecutors of selectively parsing details from statements that Kenneth had made to try to paint him as someone who's abusive. The judge said that Christie's life was viciously ended by her husband in an attack partly witnessed by two of the couple's children. Christie's brothers and fathers, who were on the cruise, responded to and witnessed the scene afterwards. The plea agreement that's signed allows for an appeal of the reasonableness of a sentence. This is like kind of pro forma in these cases. The federal public defender calls the sentence a tragedy, said the judge ignored scientific evidence. The attorneys in a court filing last month asked Burgess to consider the wishes of their children, who said they hold their father responsible, but also understand his impairments played a major factor in these events, and that they'd already lost one parent. Two daughters who gave statements during the emotional first day of the sentencing hearing spoke about their father, but did not speak to a specific sentence. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jack Schmidt said that basically the husband needs to be held accountable. It's not the sentence that prosecutors wanted, but hopefully would allow the healing process to begin with his 30-year sentence. And a statement by her family said the ruling brings, Christie's family, said the ruling brings us neither joy nor anger. It's simply a sense of resolution. They said they believe the court made a fair and just determination. However, the legal system does not and is not intended to fill up the emotional void of their loss. So I bring that up to say that's likely what happens if you commit murder on a cruise ship. Somebody witnesses it, ear witnesses are around, other members of the party wonder what's happening.
It would be very hard for it to go under the radar and nobody say anything. Very difficult.
Right. And this is just two people in a stateroom fighting, probably louder than usual, but I don't know, I don't know that a domestic incident like this happening on a cruise ship is really going to be any different than, some kind of predator trying to snatch someone.
People are going to come forward. And so I don't think there's going to be a team of predators. I certainly don't think that. And like the little things that people hear, they're going to come forward with it as soon as they realize something has happened. Right. And in fact, they're probably going to be reporting things. It is unfortunate. I wonder, so this is none of my business, but we are talking about it. I wondered if maybe he was like gambling or something. And like, I wonder what caused, because all it says is his behavior. She was unhappy with his behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's drinking and whatever medications he's on. He's probably just being a giant asshole.
Well, and that's possible, but like she's like, I want a divorce. I'm getting off and going home, and her family's there, and this is clear. I feel like it's. I mean, I guess it could be more, there could be more to it, but like just an angry response, it does seem like second-degree murder. Now, what was the sentence?
30 years.
It was 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, to me, that seems, somebody said they were disappointed, and I guess I was confused. 30 years seems like a good amount of time.
It's the public defender. They wanted less. They wanted like a manslaughter type sentence.
Oh, I see. Well, no, because like that wasn't manslaughter. It was definitely second-degree murder. But it makes me, I can see where it is possible he wasn't like a spousal abuser, right? A spouse abuser. It just came in a heat of the moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
But her dad and brother or brothers, two brothers, her dad and brothers were there. And like, I was like, oh my goodness, that is awful.
It is.
Because like, how does that even happen? Right. Except he was alone with her for just enough time. And she said, I want a divorce. I want to leave. Right. And I imagine it was very specific behavior that was happening. And I don't know. We don't have the background. I have heard people say that like cruises really do stuff to people. Like it just changes them.
Yeah.
And you have access to, maybe stuff you have never had access to before, or maybe not in the quantity that is available on a cruise ship. But my understanding is like the money that you gamble is real.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be like a bad thing to, lose. And so anyway, I don't know that had anything to do with it, but I did think it was interesting. It illustrated my point when I said earlier that like people underestimate what you can actually get away with on a cruise ship with nobody noticing.
Yeah.
And all I can think of is like the average person not fitting in a suitcase. And then like, if you have to dismember a body, it's going to bleed through the suitcase a lot. So to me, all those things come up, like it just would be very obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think most of these situations that have come up as we've talked in this series, Overboard, I think there's a better explanation than some raging mystery for these cases. And that includes Amy Lynn Bradley. And I think that, fall, jump, whether it's an accident or on purpose, that's sort of where I land on almost all of these.
And also with Christy's case, like it goes into detail that he was dragging her to he was going to throw her over, right?
Yeah.
And so keeping that in mind, it doesn't say how many people saw it, but at least one of her brothers saw it and didn't allow him to do it, right? That's the other thing. So there's that helps illustrate that as well. It's not as easy to just toss somebody that's dead weight over the side of. You're much more likely to get there on your own as opposed to somebody throwing somebody.
Right. I will say, so I pulled all of this stuff up, and like as we're sitting here and I'm talking, I pulled BOP, BOP is the Bureau of Prisons for people who don't know. I was looking for Kenneth. I wanted to see what had happened to him, and there were two people with a similar name. One was not in BOP custody as of 2018, so I don't think that's who we're looking for. But I did find a BOP entry for the murder, and I went and had to go back through Pacer. If you've never used Pacer before,
be careful.
You can spend a lot of money in Pacer and not realize you've spent it. But the reason I went and kind of poked around, because this is a murder case essentially in federal court, and that's always interesting to me. So
because they don't try murders typically.
Right. So first of all, the public defender the public defender in this murder case for the appellate matters and the more serious matters, just in case, people are interested, it's a guy named Rich Kurtner. For those of you who don't know, that was Israel Key's attorney in Alaska. He was on Kenneth Manzanera's case. supporting Jamie McGrady, who was from the Federal Public Defender's Office. Kirtner is from the Federal Public Defender's Agency. So that was interesting to me that they had the same attorney.
Yeah, I think that he's, I don't know that popular is the right word, but I think that he's used a lot in the public defense situations in Alaska.
He is. This has a different kind of conclusion. Meg pulled this up. So he's sentenced in 2021, and we get all kinds of information about that. And then we get July 16, 2021, a release from the Alaska Department of Corrections. Ultimately, here's what it says. Phil Helzel, he wrote this article. It says a Utah man sentenced to 30 years in prison for killing his wife on a cruise ship was found dead in an Alaska jail this week. Kenneth Manzanares, 43, was found unresponsive in his cell at the Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau around 7 a.m. on Wednesday and could not be revived. He was sentenced June 3rd to a 30-year federal prison term after pleading guilty to killing his wife, Christy, during a 2017 family vacation aboard the Emerald Princess. The Corrections Department said foul play is not suspected in Kenneth Manzanares' death. Department spokeswoman Betsy Hawley said inmates' medical conditions are confidential. He was being held at the state facility until he was going to be transferred to federal prison. All prisoner deaths are reviewed by the Alaska State Troopers and the State Medical Examiner's Office. The Medical Examiner's Office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. He had killed his wife as the family was on vacation on the Emerald Princess after the wife told him in their cabin she wanted a divorce and she wanted him to get off the ship at Juneau. He told others to leave the cabin, then struck his wife with his fist repeatedly, killing her. He admitted to this in a plea agreement, pleading guilty last year to second-degree murder. And then they go on to kind of rehash stuff we've already talked about. But prosecutors said the attack was deliberate. They pointed out that he told others to leave the cabin and lock the door before assaulting his wife. That's interesting to me, and that's kind of its own, I guess, karmic justice. I was
going to say that actually it's different than what other accounts had said, but whatever. Because it was like she told the girls to leave for their own safety or whatever.
Right.
But it doesn't matter either way. That was just a disaster. Can you imagine, obviously I don't think about this a lot, but it's sort of instilled in the back of my mind that I never want to get like that drunk or that tore up where once I come back from the fog, this is what you fall into.
Right.
Can you imagine? Like, it would just be awful because I don't know the deeper issues, but I doubt very seriously he meant this. Right.
Yeah.
And it's very sad.
I do think we're leaving you with a bunch of different rabbit holes here. Federal court notwithstanding, but I want to point out cruisejunkie.com. That is a fascinating website where we pulled tons of information for this Overboard series.
So I maintain that it's not as like crazy mysterious, and it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I think the more you dig,
I realize there's other numbers out there.
Yeah,
but I just think that those are. I'm sure, I don't think anybody's trying to intentionally mislead anybody. I'm sure they were derived from something that seemed legitimate. But there aren't that many Amy Lynn Bradleys out there.
No. And it is a very odd confluence of events that gives us that quote unquote mystery that's not a mystery. And I think
a lot of times it's actually people who want to help that keep things alive, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was the other story that we just talked about, the call from South Carolina with Jimmy, I guess. He was called Jimmy, right? James Christopher Scavone.
Yeah.
There was a call that came in that they had received a call.
Yeah.
That was crazy. Like, how is that linked? It was really random. But people want to help, right? Well, as soon as people start helping, they think they're doing a good thing. And, I I've said before, I think a lot of people really do believe in what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like they believe they saw Amy Lynn Bradley, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not that they're trying to be deceptive. It's just like, well, you know, because it's possible she was seen, her family like holds on to hope. And it, I don't know. I don't know that the tips are like the best things to keep happening. I feel like if like nobody had ever said anything, right? If nobody had reported seeing her anywhere at any time for any reason, I think that it might have been easier to swallow that she more than likely, went over shortly after her dad saw her legs on the balcony.
Yeah.
And I think that the tips can come from a well-meaning place and just be disastrous.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, the end result of Overboard for me is that the likelihood you're going to get some decades long mystery out of a cruise ship disappearance is likely, unfortunately, because someone has fallen or jumped overboard and someone else decided that was not the case. And like you said so pointedly, it's because people want to help, but it really muddies the waters, so to speak.
It really does. And I honestly think part of the reason Amy Lynn Bradley's case is so big, obviously a docuseries was released this year that largely featured her brother, who has been a big proponent. And, if she were to be found, he is pushing to find her. It Part of the reason her case is such a big case is because it's such a weird thing to happen, right? And after I saw the docuseries, I learned a lot from it. And I realized that it wasn't this huge unsolved mystery at all. It was literally just, I'll even give it, an accident if it wasn't like straight up suicide. I don't know, except that like things were falling into place for her to have fallen off the boat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really unfortunate case. And I guess I have to say, like, I would definitely admit if I were wrong and like somebody came up with some proof there that like showed us there was more to that story, but I have seen nothing that indicates
Well,
it's any more than.
and so anything but falling in the ocean, like there would be more to it. Like people that I guess that's sort of part of my point. Like, evidence of any sort of scuffle, attack, murder, that kind of evidence that shows up. That's like impossible to hide forever, right? It's impossible to hide to begin with. And when it's not there, like the one of the only things apparently that can occur and leave absolutely no trace evidence behind is falling from a cruise ship into the ocean.
Yeah, yeah,
And so when there is a lack of the evidence to indicate otherwise, and a person is on the ship and then they're not on the ship and it's unclear what occurred for that transition to happen, unfortunately, they're probably in the ocean.
yeah.
And I'll go with it was an accident, but they've made it harder and harder for these accidents to occur, right?
Yeah.
But they just keep happening.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. It's also a mixture of how accidents occur out there and then just what people will believe and what people will run with in terms of creating content.
Amy Bradley's case, it was before social media.
It was.
And it lived to become part of social media, I presume. If not before, it definitely would be now because it's almost like mainstream. The docuseries is almost mainstream. Her father, on I think the last part of that, the docuseries about her case, her father says that like they kept her Miata in like perfect condition for when Amy comes home. And it is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen. And it's a very real moment. And to me, it's just very sad that I don't want to call someone who was tragically lost at sea's father delusional.
Right.
But I mean, it is delusional to think like, oh, we've got her Miata safe and ready for when she comes home.
Yeah.
She's not coming home. She died a long time ago. And I can imagine being in that situation. Whoever's the front person, in Amy's case, it's her brother now.
Yeah.
And his name is Bradley. I can see how he would probably want to just like somehow crawl out of the hand he was dealt. I'm not saying he would be suicidal, but like, you're like, oh no, this is my life now. And there's nothing you can do to change it, right? Because like, I'm just the guy whose sister went missing. And I don't know, he seemed to be a little more like aware, but I don't want to, re-victimize anybody's family. But like, she's not coming home. She died.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.